Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Forms Deep Dive for June 2020. My name is Graham, and I'm an implementation consultant for Donify and part of the customer success team. And I've been working for Donify for just over 2 years, and I've worked with probably a number of you on the call, but also worked with or are currently working with a number of our Danish clients, mainly to get Donify implemented and up and running in their organizations. So it's great to see so many of you here this morning, and great to be able to kind of explore what Donify forms are and what this new feature might be able to do for many of your organizations. So firstly, what is a Donify form? So a Donify form can be displayed as a standalone form or embedded into your website. And when it is filled out and submitted, it will directly update your database with information entered according to how you configure the form. So for those of you that like a bit of a picture, your form would be hosted on a website or standalone. A submit button would be pressed, and that data would then flow nicely into Donify for you. Donify forms are available for both our essential clients and our professional clients. The only limitation on essentials is that you can only have up to 3 forms, but if you're on Donify Professional, you can have as many forms as you would like. To manage forms, you must be an administrator. However, if you're a standard user, your administrator can give you access. So if you don't see the forms option at the moment when you log into Donify, it's because you don't have the right user level. So you'd need to speak to your administrator to get access. With Donify forms, I've kind of mentioned there are 2 types. There's a standalone option which basically allows you to surround the form with a header and footer and sidebars that you can design and set up in Donify yourself. And that helps you kind of make it look like it's your own website, but it isn't your own website. You kind of would put a button onto your website and it would link off to this form and be kind of hosted more on a Donify URL. There is also the possibility though to embed the form in an iframe in your website. So it would be your website look and feel, and you would then, the form would just appear as content in the page on your website. And we're going to look at both types of these forms today. So hopefully it'll become clearer if you're a little bit unsure about the difference and how it all works. But it's important to kind of understand there are 2 types of forms. Forms can be made up of different things, and we call these elements basically. And these are things that help you control how your form is displayed, but also how the data is translated and fed into Donify. So this comes back to like that configuration and how we set it up, and basically how the setup will determine how the data ends up and how the form looks. So the kind of form elements that we currently have is that you can add an individual constituent if they're not already on the database. And if they are already on the database, we will add any of the additional information they give us to the record that already exists. And we use the duplicate matching criteria that's already in Donify. If you've looked at, if you're an administrator and you've got access to the data management section, there's a whole dedupe setting, and it's using the same criteria. And there is a knowledge base article that we can provide you that kind of lists what that dedupe matching criteria is. You can add communication consent for people that fill in your forms. We can add activities, plus any custom fields that are attached to those activities. We can also add a task. So when we add an activity, we can add a task as a follow-up. So someone might fill in a form and you may want to prompt something to happen off the back of that, that needs one of your team to look at it. So that could be a task. You can add tags, plus the custom fields for those tags. And again, you can have multiple activities and multiple tags. And you can add content to your form, so text, pictures, however you want your form to be displayed, basically. And you can add a button, so basically for the form to be submitted to Donify. Along with the elements, we have some other features in forms. And again, we'll be looking at these in the product. So we have form types, which are predefined forms which add some of the elements that we've just talked about to a form, and then you need to customize that form. So it doesn't work without customization, because you need to tell it what activity types and what information needs to actually end up and what questions you want to ask. Form language, so you can change the language of how the default field names are displayed. So if you're in Denmark and you want the questions and the field labels to be in Danish, then you can change the language. We've also included the ability to add UTM tracking codes. And UTM tracking codes, for those that aren't aware, are an industry standard way of tracking routes from a web page. So for instance, you can set up custom URLs that show you that people landed on your form from a Google ad, a Facebook page, or your website. Sorry. So yeah, or Instagram or anything. We can also integrate forms into Google Analytics. So again, with the UTM tracking codes and other things, you can then analyze where traffic's coming from, how many completing it, where they're going afterwards, etc., etc. There's the ability for branding the form for the standalone forms, and we'll look at that in more detail shortly. And then there's the ability from within Donify, without kind of connecting to Google Analytics or looking at anything, to kind of see who was the last person that filled in a form, how many people have viewed the form, how many people have filled in the form. So you've got some KPIs built into the forms functionality of Donify for you. And then we've also built in some security. So if you notice that you're getting suspect data, etc., then it is possible to block certain IP addresses from filling in the form. So how could you use forms? We're going to take you through two scenarios this morning and show you. The first scenario is just a contact us form that you might want to put on your website, that enables you, your supporters, to contact you, and they might want to contact you about a donation, a sale, a volunteer opportunity, and we'll look at how we can configure the form so that you can see what kind of contact us they're going to look at. We'll add an activity to that timeline. We'll add a task so that that contact us doesn't just sit on their timeline, but actually it can be followed up by a member of your team. We're then going to look at a volunteer form. So we'll get the details of a volunteer. We'll get the kind of event that they're interested in. We'll look at how they'd like to be contacted. We'll tag them with a few of their interests so that we know what type of volunteer they are. And they're the two main scenarios, but other scenarios in which you could use forms that we're not going to cover today, and I'm sure you can think of many other scenarios, are you could have a basic survey, and that could have up to about 40 questions if you used all the additional fields that tags and activities allowed you. So it's never going to replace SurveyMonkey, but you may want like a follow-up or something to go out that says how, you know, we've dealt with your inquiry or something, how do you feel, and like forms could help you with that, and then all the data's in Donify rather than being in a third party. And you could also at the moment use it to actually book onto something. So, you know, if you've got a free event or something that doesn't take payment, then you could use it. And as I said, really, as we show you, there'll be many scenarios, I'm sure, that for all your individual organizations that you'll be able to think, yeah, we could use forms in this way. So the first thing we're going to look at is a standalone contact us form. And for that, I'm going to go into Donify, and this is where I try and do like a live demo, basically. So when you log into Donify, and if you've got access, as we talked about earlier, you'll see this new menu item on the left-hand side. And if we expand that menu item, we'll see that we've got manage forms, the history I talked about, the security, the branding, and the Google Analytics. So hopefully the menu items make sense, and as we explore. So in this contact us form, we've said that we're going to do a standalone form. Now, before you do any standalone form in Donify, you need to go into the branding section. And the branding section basically allows you to edit the content that's going to sit around the form. So the form will sit in the middle of the page, and then you can update the header, you can put in some left side and right side navigation and footer. So if you want to kind of enable it to mirror your website, you might be able to get your web developer to provide you some HTML code, and you could insert that into the kind of header footer left hand side if you wanted to. Now, the thing to note with branding is that branding will apply to all standalone forms. So if you wanted a sub brand, for instance, you couldn't have a separate branding for that form. The sub branding would have to sit on the content of the actual form rather than this branding. This is a kind of corporate branding that would apply to all forms that use the standalone stuff. Just to note with like images as well, these need to be hosted somewhere. So ideally on your web server or on some online storage. And then when you insert an image, Donify is going to ask you for a URL that you need to provide. So you're not kind of like uploading an image to Donify. The images will need to sit on storage outside of Donify. So that's branding. And as you can see, you've got all your kind of rich text editing, and you've also got the ability, if you know what you're doing, to put some HTML code in there as well. So for this example, I'm afraid I've just set up something really simple. This is our Great Cause website. So I've put our charity logo in here. I've said it's a great cause, and I've just put our logo at the bottom. But oh yeah, I obviously was also put some links in the bottom as well to take you back to the website. So that's branding. So now that we've set up our branding, we want to kind of go and set up our form. So we need to go into manage forms. Now, manage forms will come up, and if you've already got forms in here, you will see those forms. But if we just imagine for the moment that we have no forms and we're going to add our first form. So to add a form, we click on add form, and before we add a form, it's going to ask us what type of form we want. Now we can have a contact us type, a volunteer application, or we can start with a blank form. So in this example, I know we're doing a contact us form, but I'm going to start with a blank form. I'm going to call this website contact us, and for every response that comes in, we can set a campaign. So in this example, because the contact us is going to sit on the website, I've set up a campaign, and we're going to call it website. So I'm going to save the changes, and that then takes me into what we call the form editor. And the first thing it asks us about is the behavior of the form, and it fills in the things that we've kind of already filled in, and it gives us a URL for this form with a suffix. You can change this, so if you wanted to change it to contact us, that's okay. And then you can also set a page that once they've submitted the form that you're going to be redirected to. So you might have a thank you page on your website that you want everyone to get once they've submitted the form. Now, because this is a demo, I won't put a page in there as such because I haven't got a thank you page, but you would just copy the URL of the page and paste it into there. Then we get asked whether we want the form to be standalone or iframe. And in this example, we said we want it to be a standalone, and that will then give us the HTML that we want to kind of put behind a button. But now we need to kind of go and design our form. So we at the moment, because we chose a blank, there are no elements in here at all. So we have down here the elements that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, and it's really simple in terms of to add an element, we just add it and it comes into the form layout, and then we can get it to show the details. So for instance, we might want to put some text, hoping this works, yeah, that I prepared earlier, into the editor, and then yeah, you can highlight it, make it bold, you can change the font size, the color, whatever you want to do, and that will then come down, and then we can just hide the details if we want to, or you can just leave it open. We then want to, for this form, add an activity. Now you can move these around if you end up adding things in the wrong order. You can also remove them from the form. So again, if you if things get added incorrectly, don't worry. It's all very dynamic and it's really easy. So you can add an activity, and the first thing it says, do you want to add an activity without asking a question, or do you want to add a question, or do you want to ask a question? Now we just want the activity to be added. The fact that they submit the form will mean that the activity gets added. So we're not going to ask a question, we're just going to add an activity. And the activity type we're going to is, we've set up an activity type called contact form on the website. It could be any activity you've set up, and it will pull through the additional fields that you want, or sorry, the extra fields that you've configured for that activity type. So if you've configured like 10 extra fields, then all those would appear here. In this case, with this activity type on this database, we've got an additional field called source and type of activity. We do want to create a task when this is added because we want to have some follow-up. So I'm going to set it up so that Graham gets a task because he's the most likely one to respond in the team, and give our customers the best response. So please follow up this inquiry. And then we can set the number of days after the form submission that this is due. So you may have a customer charter, or you may have some time in which you hope that you'd respond to these things. So I'm going to put 2 days for this because I think I put 1 to 2 days in the form content. And we can send this person an email. We can mark this activity as confidential, but it's not really confidential, and we can also set an alert, which I'm not going to do. We can then go and look at our additional fields. Now, source, I'm going to just ignore it, but type of inquiry, I'm actually going to ask a question. And I'm going to ask a question, but I'm going to get them to choose from a list. So the question that I'm going to ask is, what is the nature of your inquiry? And then I'm just going to put some fields or some values into here that are separated by commas. And they will then appear on the form when we look at it as a drop down, and then we'll be able to know what the nature of the inquiry is. I think actually, having said I'm not going to ask a question. Okay, yeah. I think I am going to ask a question here. No, actually, let's leave it. Can't remember. I'll come back if I need to change it. We then are going to need to add some details about the individual that's making this inquiry. We're going to add this to the form with the individual block. Now, when we click in the individual block, we get the standard fields that we'd expect for the constituent, and we can either ask them or make them required. So we can make them mandatory, or we can turn them off. So in this example, I'm going to ask for their first name, their last name, their email address, and their phone number, and I'm going to make mandatory their first name, last name, and email address. Those fields will then go onto the form. And then we can hopefully, I'm going to save the changes of this form. Okay, hang on, sorry, I've already used this URL when I was testing, and for another, so I'm just going to change it. So we've now saved our form, and we can now preview the form and how it looks. So okay, my demo. Okay, what's going on? Why is it not working?
You just save it, Graham.
Did I not? I thought I had saved it. No. Always demo. Okay, I might have to go to one I've prepared earlier, which is why I did it. I'll come out of it and go back in. Yeah, so here is the form that we've put together. We've got the heading at the top, then we've got the content that we added. We've got the drop-down list, which gives us the nature of their inquiry. We've got their first name, last name. And so what I've failed to add is the submit button. And also we haven't really got an area where they can say what their inquiry is about. So it's really easy to now go and edit this form. We've gone and found our form, we've opened it, and we can now edit as we were in. So we need to add to the form a submit button. So if we click on there, it will default as submit, and you can change the size of the button and also the color of the button. So maybe we'll make it medium and green. It will give you an example of what that looks like, and that will now submit anything that's filled in. And we also want to go back into our activity and say, actually, we will ask a question with this, and we'll say something like, please give the nature of this inquiry. And if we save the changes, preview the form. Okay, I know that's gone. I've forgotten how I did this last time. That isn't gonna. Okay, so let's just go into my test, which I did, and just see what I did. Yeah, further information. Sorry, I missed a trick, so I'll just go back into, so you can all see what needs to happen. So if we go back into add activity, down here you can ask for further information, and the answer will go into the activity notes. I missed this, and it's a yes, no at the bottom. So we do want to ask a question to fill in those notes, and the question we want to ask is, please give details of the nature of this inquiry. So if we save this, and if we now preview this form, we now have a form, and I'm actually happy with this form. I've got some text at the top that explains what the form is about, the fact that fields with a star are not mandatory. I've got a drop-down list that they can now tell me what the nature of my inquiry is. So it's about a donation. I can then type in the nature of my inquiry. Please, can you send me a donation form? Help if I can type form in the post. I'm going to fill in my name and my email address. I'm not going to bother with my phone number. I'm quite happy for them to reply to me by email address, and I'm going to click submit. Now, this is, I haven't set up a form or page that takes you, so it says the form does not have a page to redirect, but that was in the settings and we looked at that. So hopefully it would now take you to a nice kind of thank you page that you've set up. So if we were to go into Donify and look for me, we find my record here, and on my timeline, all being well, on the 3rd of June is a contact form on the website. And if we look at that activity, I'm asking for them to send me a donation form in the post, and we've got an activity associated to this, and it's been assigned to Graham. And if we logged in as Graham to Donify, he would now have a task to follow this up. So as you can see, it's taken the information from the form and put it into an activity as we'd expect. The other thing we've got here is the type of inquiry. So you could start to now do lists on these activity types and track, you know, the nature of the inquiries that are coming through the form just by creating a simple list. And if you want to know more about lists, you could look at the deep dive from last month, which was all about lists. So I won't do a list now, but that's how that works. So if we were to go back to our contact us form, hopefully now you've seen that we've kind of set up a standalone form with branding. We've kind of got the code to put a button onto our website, and we've added an activity to the timeline, and we've added a task so that that activity can be followed up. So if I just go back into forms and go back into manage forms, if we now look at this, this form has been viewed 3 times. There's no spam that we're aware of, and it's been submitted. And the first submit was the 3rd of June, and the last submit was obviously today as well. And our submitted percentage is that, and we've had no errors from this form. So as I said, there's some really key metrics just even within Donify that kind of tell you how well your form is being used, how many people are seeing it, and then how many people are actually actioning it. So that's with forms. The only other thing just to say lastly about this standalone form is, and I did mention it, but again, this is the kind of HTML that you'd need to give to your website manager or your web agency, and they'd need to create a button on your website, and that button would then on click take you to the page that we were looking at, and the form would be displayed basically. So that's the code there, and you can literally just copy it and send it and all should work. So I think that's all I've got to say about that scenario, and hopefully that is clear and makes sense. So the next scenario I'm going to look at is like an embedded volunteer form. And so for this, I'm not going to go to the extent of probably collecting all the information that you'd need for someone to volunteer, but it's more like I'm interested in volunteering. And we obviously want to get the details of the volunteer. We want to understand a bit about what they're interested in. So what program or what thing are they interested in volunteering for? And for this, I was just going to show you how we use communication preferences. So how would they like to be contacted? And then how do we use tags to kind of capture what a volunteer might be interested in? And this time we're going to embed it into a website so that you can see again how easy it is and what that looks like. So if we go back into Donify and we go back to forms and we just close this a minute and we click add a form. This time I'm going to use a type of volunteer application. So I'm going to put volunteer or interested in volunteering. And I'm going to use this valued volunteers 2018 because it makes sense and it's in our database. But you would probably set up a new campaign. This form behavior is as we want it. Again, if we want to put a thank you page in, we can, and we'll come back to this code in a minute. So if we go into designer, this time instead of having a blank form layout, we've got some elements that have been given to us that we may or may not want to use, but these are the suggestions. And as I said before, if you were to save this now and try and use it, the form wouldn't work. These are just suggestions that still need your time and your configuration. So if you open up form content, there's no text in here or anything like that. So we'll just add some text. It says, please. Oh. Now, again, with these form content blocks, these can be used to help give sections to your form or add images or just enable you to explain what you're asking, where you're asking it. So you can have more than one form content block on your form. So this is just the one that is at the beginning. And as we go, I'll maybe split it up with some content so you can just see how that works. So in our constituent details, again, we need to kind of go, what do we need to know? So this time we're going to definitely need first name, last name. We're going to need the email address. We're probably going to need a postal address, and we're going to need a phone number. And I'm not going to make that one mandatory. So again, we've got some required fields and we've got some optional fields. So that's our constituents. And this time we're going to, again, want to add an activity. So volunteer, we'll add a volunteering activity. Again, we can add a task because this activity, we'll maybe give it 5 days this time because it's a bit more. Oh, please follow up, and we'll select Graham again. We'll send an email, and then we can again, this time we've obviously got more custom fields against this, but we will this time kind of go, let's again have some drop down lists about the projects, so all the opportunities that we want. So what are you interested in volunteering for? And maybe we put, oh look, there we go, a list I did earlier. So data cleaning, looking after children, helping with a marathon, office admin, helping with a stall at an event. And then at the moment for this form, I'm going to leave these kind of start and end dates and number of hours and timesheet and all of that. But I might just ask something that goes into notes that says, please give us any other information that supports your application or something. I'm then going to close that activity. And so we were going to do some other things with this form. So we were going to add some tags, and we were going to add some communication consent. So if we add some tags first, so these will need to come before we submit our form. So we can just drag and drop by clicking on these 3 things. And if we do show details, basically we can add a tag without asking a question, or we can ask a question. So I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to find some tags. So I think running was 1. So are you a keen runner? And then you can add, again, with, as we did with activities, if you want a question that would put things into notes about this. So you might ask, how far can you run, etc., etc. But I'm just gonna, can you run, or are you a keen runner? And then I want to add some other tags as well, so I can just keep adding these tags and just keep moving them. So we'll add 2 tags. I've forgotten else what interested in is in here. Cyclist. And again, the additional fields have come up, but we're just going to say so again, you know, these are really customizable, and depending how you've got your system configured depends how you can then use the tags and activities in your data. So I'm going to hide those, and then going to look at communication consents. So actually, what do we want to know about this person? So you can ask permissions for all the channels that you've got set up. You can even ask how they'd be preferred. So what's their preferred channel? And then you can ask permissions for purposes. Now, if you ask permissions for purposes, it will just add all the purposes that you have in the system. So you can't like just ask for one purpose, it will show them all. We're going to say, can you send us email, mail, and with phone. We won't do text message and we won't ask, but we will ask about what they want to hear about. So if we were to save this form now, and if I preview the form, it will always preview it as a standalone form. But it's a really good option to kind of keep previewing your form, because if we preview this form now, we can kind of see it's quite a lot going on and we've added lots of stuff, which is really good. And we might go, that's fine. But one thing here, it kind of goes from your phone number to what are you interested in volunteering for. I noticed I've got a spelling mistake. But so you might want to kind of pad it out, or you might want to provide some line breaks or something. So that's really easy to achieve as well. So if we go into design that and we were to add another form content, and then we would kind of add it before the tags, we can add some just enters just to give more spaces, or we could just add a basic kind of H rule, and that just provides like a line. Basically, you probably can't see it, but there is a line there. And again, you know, if you've got someone who knows HTML in your organization, then you also get them to do some more clever things than I can do. But if we just do tags for this so that we know, and then if we save the changes again, and we go to preview, we can see that it's kind of put some space. Now I've put far too much space in, but you kind of get the idea. So we've now got this form, and as you can see, actually, because it's not a standalone form, the branding has gone from around the edge and it's just filled our entire screen. So what we need to do is go back to form behavior, and we need to grab this code here. Now, just to show you how easy it is to embed something in a website, I have got open here the Donify Squarespace website, and we created this page earlier which was like volunteer for us. Don't worry, no one can get to this page, it's not a published page, but I'm just going to edit this page. Now obviously this varies for all the different types of content management systems about how you do it, whether it's WordPress, Drupal, but in the sense that it's all the same. And you know, again, a web developer would easily be able to do this if you're struggling or you have external parties that manage your thing. So we're going to edit this code block that I'm going to try and edit this code. Yeah. So in Squarespace, they have code blocks which you can add, and I've literally just added this code that Donify gave me. And you can now see that within my site, with my life, all our navigation, all our pictures, all our branding, we now have this wonderful form that we could fill in, and it would add all this stuff. Oh no, what did I just do? Okay. And I was trying to scroll down, and I've totally changed the width of the iframe. And you can see the whole form there. So I'm going to actually, what have I done? Anyway, yeah, I've kind of edited it, and this just shows you need to kind of, it's not great doing it on the fly. So, but yeah, you can paste it in and it appears, was the kind of nature of that one. So that's embedded form. And some of the things that we haven't kind of mentioned yet that I'll mention on this form, we talked about language. So under the language tab, this is where you can now go, okay, for title, what do you want it to be, first name, and you literally just type in the value that you want it to be called, and then you'd save the changes. So language is by per form. So by default, it will always use the same. It's not like branding where you apply it. So you could just have one form that had different labels. And if you wanted that on the next form, you'd have to fill in the language for this form as well. The tracking tag is where we handle the UTM codes. And just to give you an example of this, you can select the source. So we might say, okay, it's a Facebook source. It's a post on Facebook. And it's an ad, basically. And then when we create that link, oh, sorry, where will this form be hosted? So you put in your organizational thing, and if we create a link, again, you would give this code, if you wanted it to be a button, you'd give this code to your web developer, and if you were giving them the iframe, you would now post this, and as you can see, it's added the source and the medium to the URL. So you can have multiple codes created for the same form, so that if you have it pointing separately from varying platforms, they can all have a unique link which then follows through, and you can track it. So that's just something really useful, that it just enables you to give you a bit more kind of, you know, is that ad on Facebook working? Is that Google ad that we've got actually, is anyone actually ending up on the form? And then if they do end up on the form, are they actually doing something? So it's quite good, and marketeers particularly will like the fact that you can do that kind of tracking. So that is that form. So I'm going to go back to my presentation now and just go through some kind of frequently asked questions that I obviously haven't been looking at the chat, so apologies if the team have already answered some of these. But can forms take payments? The answer is not yet, but this is very much on the product roadmap, and we're looking to provide payments both for one-off payments by Stripe, so you could take a donation, but also for regular direct debit payments by Go Cardless. So watch this space. Payments on forms will be coming soon. Can you have multiple forms? As I said at the beginning, yes, you can. On the professional version, you can have as many forms as you like, and on Essentials, you can have up to 3 forms. Can you set up an organization? At the moment, you can only set up an individual, but again, group constituent types are on the roadmap. However, just a workaround in the short term, there's nothing to stop you capturing an organizational name and putting that information into an additional field or something. So the information could be captured, you just can't set up a constituent type of a group at the moment. Can a constituent land on a form and have the details pre-populated? Not yet. However, this is on our roadmap, and it's a feature that we're going to call authenticated forms, which basically means that you could send them a unique link, and when they land on the form, the details that we have on their record would already be populated. So it could have their name, an address already pre-populated so that they don't have to populate it. And it means that then the tags and activities definitely will reach their record. Can forms add gift day declarations? Again, no, but it is on the roadmap. So in the sense that we're looking already to expand what next with forms, even though they already do lots. Can the style of forms be changed? Not yet. So we're looking at adding some styling features that will probably come under branding that will allow you to change things like font colors and etc. But it's again a feature to look for. And can you send an email on submit? So not yet, but this is planned. So at the moment, all a form can do once you press submit is redirect to like a thank you page. But the plan is that when you do that, you could take them to the thank you page and then also send them an email confirmation. So that is kind of the end of the kind of formal presentation. I hope you found that useful and that it's given you some useful pointers about how to get started with forms, giving you some inspiration about how forms can be used and how you might use them within your organization. But I'm sure that probably some of you have some questions.